I want to begin my address to this synod by expressing my deep gratitude for all the ways in which churches and schools and other ministries across this diocese have served with such compassion and courage and hope through these past difficult months. Thank you to each and every one of you. And with the dramatic rise that we are now seeing in COVID infections, both in the city and some other parts of the county this past week, it is clear that there are still difficult days to come. COVID-19 has changed life for nearly every organisation and individuals all across the world. Now, many of these changes have been hugely stressful and deeply challenging. But there is also a potentially positive consequence of this terrible pandemic, which is the acceleration of change, enabling organisations to fulfil their mission more effectively, embracing new ways of working and experimenting with creative forms of innovation. That's what we've been observing over these past months, including in the church. Now, David McCulloch directed my attention to a recent article by the writer and thinker Tom Rainer. He's the founder and CEO of an influential online community which is a resource for church leaders around the world. Rainer points out that while 2020 may be a year we would all prefer to forget, it could also prove to be a significant turning point for the church by the grace of God. Now, Rainer's been devouring news and studies of churches and other organisations who are not succumbing to the inevitability of life getting worse and organisational health simply deteriorating. He writes this: "When I recently synthesised many of the articles and podcasts addressing these challenges positively, I saw a pattern. These organisations do not have their metaphorical heads in the sand. To the contrary, they are looking up and they're looking around to see the new paths and the new possibilities in this new and sometimes painful reality." Now, Rainer goes on to articulate from the patterns that he observed 4 attitudes that are emblematic of successful organisations of the near future. I want to share them briefly with you because I think they are highly relevant for every church and every school and all the different chaplaincies and forms of ministry around the diocese. I think they're also highly relevant for our work as a synod and also for the wider Church of England at this time. First attitude is this: that God is not done with us yet. While leaders of secular organisations were unlikely to articulate this attitude in the same way as church leaders, Rainer noticed that all healthy organisations had attitudes of hope and possibility. Defeatism was a foreign concept for them. As the church, of course, we have a unique capacity to be profoundly realistic and yet also outrageously hopeful. Our God is the God of all hope, and so is the gospel that he's entrusted to us for the sake of the whole world. So God is not done with us yet. First attitude that Rainer noticed. The second attitude is we are not waiting for things to return to normal. Any organisation waiting for a pre-COVID normal is already in trouble. Any churches expecting the return soon to patterns of ministry as we remember them in 2019 will really be up against a wall. Rainer says there will not even be a new normal because normal cannot be defined. These leaders, he says, are looking for indicators of a new reality, and then they are making pivots to these new realities. On to a third attitude, and that is that we will be more outwardly focused than ever. The leaders of future-orientated organisations are determined more than ever to reach beyond themselves. The churches and organisations of the future cannot and must not be navel gazers. As one former Archbishop of York once put it, as the church, we have always existed primarily for the benefit of the non-members. Well, onto a fourth attitude, and that is that major change is inevitable and we will embrace it. The healthy church or organisation of the future cannot simply move from change averse to change receptive. They must proactively seek and move towards that radical change rather than simply waiting for it to happen to them with a sense of resignation. Rayner puts it like this. He said, these organisations must take faith-based risks like many have never known before. If the leaders of these organisations succumb to the whiners who lament, we've never done it that way before, then the organisation is doomed. Healthy organisations of the future will embrace change with wisdom and courage. Now, let me say, none of this diminishes for a moment the reality that we are living in very difficult times, which for some is profoundly heartbreaking. That may be due to the loss of a loved one, or the fear of losing a job, or the stress on mental health, or in fact the strain on relationships. Our present mission is to live well for Jesus now, and to be a church that is marked by compassion and kindness. But we're also living in a time of incredible opportunity, and therefore we need to look with fresh eyes on the needs of the world around us, and that includes the environment itself, and also with renewed vision to celebrate the goodness of God and his purposes in redemption. Which is why, if we will boast of anything, it will be the cross of Christ and hope that springs from his resurrection. This is our gospel. Now, what is the relevance of this to the mission of God in every part of this diocese and the work of this synod? Well, the truth is we remain at an exciting tipping point in the growth of the church in this diocese. In fact, the latest mission stats contain some positive signs that new growth is continuing to slow the rate of decline. The measures also indicate that many parishes are still declining overall, even where they're welcoming new disciples at the same time. Now, in the main, that's due to the high age profile in many of our churches. Well, it will be another year or two before we are likely to review comparable stats again due to the COVID restrictions on meeting together. But in the meantime, we know that the church is growing because new people are being welcomed through connecting via services online, and I've heard some really encouraging stories of people coming to new faith over these past difficult months, some as a result of the compassionate care that they've received from Christians in their community. And on the Diocesan Conference earlier this week, Bishop Emma Einarson helped us to think theologically, reflect on how we measure success, and to be careful to watch out for those spiritual pitfalls and temptations along the way. Now, at a diocesan level, we are developing 7 key streams of work where we anticipate that accelerating change can result not only in being more efficient, but also more effective, and above all, becoming a more Christ-centred and Jesus-shaped church for the 2020s. For those who joined us on the Diocesan Conference, you'll have already heard me mention these streams, but stay with me. It may be the 1 or 2 new details that will be helpful for you. The first stream is this, and that's transformational change appointments. We're not looking to reduce stipendiary numbers at this time in our diocese, though let me say that may become necessary in the near future if our financial position, particularly with regard to parish share, doesn't improve. But where there is a parish or a benefice which has been steadily declining over time, and where it's not able to meet its local ministry costs, and perhaps is stretched particularly in terms of lay leadership, well, then we need to look at a different model for resourcing mission and enabling new growth. So we're going to look to make more transformational change appointments. This is, in fact, something that we've been doing already over the past few years, as some of you will know. And in fact, it's nothing new for the Church of England either. But at this time, we're going to extend this more flexible model of deployment by increasing the number of shorter term appointments into contexts where significant change will be needed to fulfill the missional aspirations and the possibilities that have been identified. Now, most of these will vary from 3 to 5 years, a few maybe less. Our hope is that many will become longer term appointments. Now, I don't believe that this will impair the focus of our mission or our capacity to recruit suitably gifted people to these posts. In fact, I believe it can enhance and accelerate change, leading to growth. And let me be clear, for parishes in areas of higher deprivation, we do not anticipate that they will necessarily meet the full costs of the ministry that they receive. That has always been the case, and that will not change. And as a diocese, we receive from the Church Commissioners funding that is calculated on the basis of deprivation indices across the country. And I must also add that some of our financially poorer parishes are, in fact, some of our most generous in their commitment to meet parish share. Well, that's a first stream, transformational change appointments. A second stream of work is new models of missional leadership. Now, there are two parts to this at the moment. The first is to develop local leaders in mission. That means identifying and equipping and commissioning initially 25 people who can be authorised to be the focal point as a local leader. Now, this might work particularly well, though not exclusively, in rural multi-parish benefices. It could include retired clergy and self-supporting ministers and lay readers, but also others who might be given some training and some support to step into a ministry that some, frankly, are already exercising. Now, again, this is already happening and it's well received in some parts of the diocese, but we want to accelerate the pattern. We want to properly support it and invest in it. The second part of this shift in regard to patterns of missional leadership is to conduct a multi-parish benefice review. And that will give us the opportunity to consider more effective and efficient ways of sustaining present ministry, including the buildings which are simultaneously both a gift and sometimes a burden, while also at the same time permitting new forms of mission to be established, especially where this might mean reaching a younger and more diverse demographic. Again, we can build on where this is already being explored, for example, through the work of the Potting Shed Church and its connections with the churches around that area. Then the third stream of work is this, Youth and Children Growing Disciples Task Group. And that's going to be led by Bishop Andy, so that we can really build on some of the pioneering work that has more recently taken place, especially at parish level, but also including the excellent foundations laid through the Younger Leadership College and through the work of those churches that shared in the Young Life learning communities and making a step change in their commitment to children's ministry. Jen Lynn is our new lead on this, and she is not waiting for a post-COVID window. There is already in development a wild and free programme that we hope will really accelerate the discipleship of young people and provide a context for more stretching leadership formation. And that this is something that some of our youth groups can engage with around the diocese, but also where young people are there in churches in ones and twos. We also want to invest further in the best work happening and increase the number of centres of excellence in children and youth ministry, that they themselves might have a multiplying effect as they support churches around them. A fourth stream of work is a communications review. Now, this is already well underway, and it's looking to further improve our central diocesan communications, both internally to one another and externally to those, as it were, outside the life of the diocese. And then at the same time, we hope this review will enable us to provide additional support and training for parishes, particularly with the development of online ministry and mission. And that includes better engagement with social media platforms. Then to a fifth stream of work, and that's increasing diversity in leadership and in mission. Now, this is not only about responding to the stark wake-up call created by the global reaction to the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, though it certainly does include that, and includes addressing the systemic and institutional racism that we still see pervades many parts of our society, of which the Church of England has been a part. We want to move the dial on this one, not simply to add more heat, which then only cools over time once the issues seem to drop down the list of priorities. The clearest change, I believe, will come about as we increase the diversity of those engaged in lay and ordained leadership in the Church. This will not happen overnight, but it will need strategic planning and not just wishful thinking. Greater diversity also means encouraging the vocations of people from more diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, and those for whom the Church's culture often seems quite a foreign one to the one that they're living in. Then on to a sixth stream of work, and that is the prayer stream. Because prayer is the engine of God's mission. Many of us know that. And it's through prayer that we most clearly express our dependence on God. And we acknowledge his lordship over our lives and over his church. Prayer also changes things, starting with us. Now, I know that Dean Nicola and the Minster are committed to finding creative ways to open up fresh wells of spiritual resource and sustenance for the mission of the whole diocese. And I'm grateful to them for that commitment. With, if I may mix my metaphors, rivers of spiritual life flowing into the cathedral as well as out into the diocese. And to do this in partnership with other initiatives, including Thy Kingdom Come and 24/7 prayer, and of course the inspirational Nottingham City Prayer Network. And starting on the first Friday in November, I want to urge the diocesan family, starting here with this synod, to set our phones or alarms to pray for 5 minutes at 12 noon on that first Friday in November and on the Fridays following, so that we can engage together, at least for a moment, in concerted midday prayer. It may just be for 5 minutes, it may be that for some it can be for longer, but to create a concert of prayer and to ask that God will continue to revive us, to start with us, with the church, and to revive faith in our nation. Well, on to a seventh stream, and that's well-being and resilience. And let me say, this doesn't only apply to clergy, but is something all God's people should be carefully considering. I shared at the Diocesan Conference the idea of reviewing your RPMs, which most of us understand is revs per minute. I gave it a different twist. Of course, we all know what happens to an engine of a car if you were to drive it at 50 miles per hour in second gear. Well, it wouldn't take very long before that engine would blow up. We are living in exceptionally intense times where the pace of change has an impact on all aspects of our life: relational, physical, mental, and spiritual. RPMS. And I want us to be a diocese in which we go on creating a culture of well-being that increases our missional capacity and our evangelistic zeal, rather than depleting it over time through persistent neglect of our relationships or our bodies or our minds and, of course, our souls. Now, these 7 streams of work are already underway. They, of course, are not an end in themselves. They are about resourcing and enabling the ministry of the whole diocese in every place in which God calls us to be present as we continue growing disciples together. There are a few practical steps, though, that I hope will help with the delivery of these objectives. The first is to proceed with seeking the appointment of a new Archdeacon of Newark, which is a post that will be advertised again shortly. We need a full pack of cards, as it were, and our archdeacons are definitely our aces. So we're going to be proceeding with that, and I would invite the Synod to be praying for that appointment. Secondly, I am looking to second an experienced parish priest to work half-time as a bishop's advisor for urban and estates mission, so that we can ensure that in a time like this, our mission in areas of higher deprivation is extending, not reducing. Then there's a third practical step, and I cannot overstate this one. Let us be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. We are living in quite extraordinary times with exceptional challenges, but also we are given extraordinary and exceptional opportunities. We still have the best news anywhere on our planet. Jesus Christ is Lord. And there is nothing better that anyone can do with their life than become a follower of Jesus Christ. So the power of the Holy Spirit, let us move forward together. We will not get everything right, and we will not always agree. But I would urge us, for the sake of the gospel and to the glory of God, to be kind to one another, to be tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. And as we do this, God's light will go on shining through us as his church. And people will be drawn to the source of that light, a light which for generations yet to come is the only light that will ever lighten the darkness and defend us from all perils and dangers, and will grant us a glorious inheritance with the saints in eternal light. So may the Lord bless this synod and the life of our diocese at this time as we share in this great endeavour to the glory of God.